Hello, I'm Stuart Bowes, and you're watching or listening to the Net Hero podcast. This is a podcast for you if you care about what we're doing to the planet. You don't have to be an eco-warrior. We believe business is the solution to making things better. But we're for people who want to make that difference by either cutting their emissions or coming up with ideas that can help us do things a bit better. We've featured politicians, academics, lots and lots of business people, entrepreneurs, inventors, and of course people who are just interested in doing the right thing. So sit back, listen and enjoy, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Please share it with your friends and colleagues, and you can always check out our two websites that cover all of this, Energy Live News and FutureNetZero.com. This podcast is purely editorial, so sit back and enjoy this week's episode. Now, on the Net Hero podcast, we always look with a realistic view of where the world is. And a lot of people shout me down for it. In fact, they think I'm talking shit. Well, I'm not. Because the world is a mix. You can't have a world that's just pure electric. You can't have a world that's pure nuclear. You can't have a world that's pure biomass. It doesn't matter what it is. Fusion, you need a mix. But over the last few years, you'll have clearly seen, if you follow this sector, there's been a lot of prejudice against gas. Many people believe that once the clean fuel, as it was seen in the 70s, 80s, and certainly when I was growing up, is now the dirty fuel. And we may have got rid of coal, but gas should be next on our hit list. And yet without gas, how on earth would we power our homes? And that brings us to the next conundrum with gas, which is if you do see a role for it, how are you going to get it moved around? Many people think that hydrogen might be the answer, but then there's a school of thought saying, well, the hydrogen that you have got now will never run in the gas pipe networks that we've got laid in the ground because it would leak out. So where are we on the picture of gas? We talk about biomethane, green gas, doesn't matter what it is. It's been a vital energy fuel source for more than sort of 80 years for us, and certainly led to a real big boom the last 50 years. So if its days are numbered, what's the point of its networks? That's what I'm going to discuss today with James Earl, who is the CEO of the Future Energy Networks, or FEN, which is a great name for it. James, hello.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on the show today.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Let's just explain what FEN is, or Future Energy Networks. People have probably heard of, National Grid and things like that. There's a bit of a change the last couple of years. So just explain where we are in terms of the gas networks and what the organisation you represent does.
Cool. So Future Energy Networks is still a relatively nascent organisation. We are coming up to a year in August. We will celebrate our first birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And we've been put in place by the gas networks, so National Gas, Transmission Level, and the 4 gas distribution networks, as their representative organisation. Our parent company is IGEM, the Institution of Gas Engineers and Managers. So we've been brought into being to provide that focal point for this conversation about gas and the future of gas. And the timing is important here because with the net zero announcement a few years ago now, there has been this big spotlight on what role will gas play in the energy transition and what role will it play out to 2050 as well. And so I think FEN has come at a good time so that we can help really shine a spotlight on these issues. And our real reason for being really is to help do that, bring evidence to light around the role of gas, do pieces of new research, bring stakeholders together around these issues and help ultimately guide decision makers and guide the sector.
For people who don't know, it was all kind of built in one go, wasn't it? Years and years ago, decades ago, it was the national grid and it was the grid of electricity, and then gas came as well as pushed out. There was things like town gas years ago. So when did it all split up? Because when sort of national grid was slightly broken up a little while ago, is that when the gas pipes, let's just call them pipes to make it simple, who took those over?
Yeah, so I mean, gas has had a very long journey. I can't even think how far back it would be. You'd be talking about centuries rather than years or decades. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, gas was centralized through public ownership and then privatized in the 90s, and then beyond that in exactly the same way that the electricity industry was as well, such that we're now in a situation today where we have one owner and operator of the transmission system across England, Wales and Scotland. That's National Gas. who used to be.
So that's the pipes, yeah, the pipes that bring.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
sorry, that's the
Yep.
transmission,
Yep.
the big pipes, as I like to call them, the big pipes that move gas all the way across the country, taking LNG from LNG terminals, taking gas from the North Sea and move it around the country. So they're National Gas, who used to be until relatively recently part of National Grid, but have broken away from National Grid. And then we have 4 gas distribution networks, Cadent, who run about half of the gas distribution system in the middle part of the country, SGN in Scotland and the south, Wales and West Utilities are in Wales and the southwest, and Northern Gas Networks in the northeast as well.
So, in terms of the infrastructure, has it really changed over the last 50 odd years? Because, I remember gas pipes going in, and you see some works, and they go, we're changing a few things. But pretty much, I was talking to a guy not that long ago, funny enough, who was digging some stuff in. Mate, they're brilliant. Nothing happens with these. They've been put in, about 80 years ago, and they're still going strong. People have talked about, and people will know about water pipes having to be replaced, and maybe electricity cables have to be redone. What's the state? What's the sort of health of those tubes and pipes that bring gas around the country?
So the short answer to your question is that quite a bit has changed in the gas pipeline network since it first came in many years ago. And in recent history, that's been driven by a program by the Health and Safety Executive to update old metallic pipes and mains and modernize them with new plastic pipes and mains to really kind of modernize the system. The real driver for that has been around safety, so minimizing leakage and minimizing potential incidents on the network. But the very nice consequence that also has is it really helps our gas grid for transportation of green gases as well, and really helps to sort of modernize the system. The comparison with water is really interesting, of course, because and I don't want to comment on that too much, but you see the challenges that the water industry is facing through challenges of investment over the years. We're fortunate enough that we do have a very modern and very ultra reliable gas grid, and that is in no small part down to that program of replacement of the old sort of metallic infrastructure with newer plastic pipes, I should say.
Gas is a funny thing because it kind of can get anywhere, can't it? Really, people. This is the stuff that we'll discuss in a minute, but people talk about heat pumps and how are you going to get a heat pump up a 14-story building, whereas a gas pipeline, off it goes. Is pretty much gas one of those things that you can just pretty much get anywhere, apart from, of course, people who live right in the countryside who have to have their own sort of systems or kind of, gas delivered to them. How extensive is the network that you're sort of in charge of?
Yeah, so you're right. Compared to other countries, certainly the UK has a really extensive gas pipeline network, and that has largely come about as a factor of the North Sea gas that we've had access to over the last 40, 50 years. And that's meant that gas has become really super fundamental to our energy system. There will always be particular rural communities and things for which a gas pipeline network to them won't necessarily be the most economic solution, but most people in the country have access to gas in some form. And gas is used for a huge variety of different purposes, whether it would be heating homes with gas boilers, generating power. Gas still generates around a third of our power, whether it be for use in heavy industry or lighter commercial uses. And I could name probably hundreds of different uses of gas in commercial settings. Gas is fundamental to our energy system in many different ways.
It still carries the bulk of the load, isn't it? We've had a lot about renewables, and they play a brilliant role, up to sort of 45%, I think, last year, or maybe even more. Coal is pretty much gone. But if I turned off all the gas today, we'd have a lot of blackouts.
Absolutely. If we turned off the gas today, the lights go out. Obviously, people's homes, the majority, or if not all, actually, people's homes would stop being heated in any way. It is an underpinning fuel for our society, and I can't really stress that enough. As it is today, gas provides such a huge amount of energy. It's around 700 terawatt hours, which, trust me, is an awful lot of energy, goes through our gas pipes every single year. So it is completely fundamental to the way that our society operates. That is changing. That is changing. We're seeing obviously
Yeah.
decarbonisation of electricity, and gas renewables are being used more and more. Gas is being used less. However, there are always going to be periods when the sun doesn't shine. Always going to be periods when the wind doesn't blow. Gas is the backup. Gas is seen as the backup and used as the backup, and I can't see that changing for a long time to come.
I suppose one thing people think of gas like we do, just, hey, it's in our houses. As I grew up with gas. I love still cooking with gas, and you definitely got it for your boilers and things like that. But it has a massive role in business, doesn't it? In industry, gas is powering not just kind of things like restaurants and things that you might think, but it's powering hospitals, it's powering trains, big furnaces. So it's got a big role in industry still, hasn't it?
A massive, massive role. Gas is used all across, through from the biggest industries in this country all the way through to sort of smaller commercial enterprises and things as well. And if you read the Committee on Climate Change's recent Carbon Budget 7 report, they've been absolutely crystal clear in that there will be a number of industries for which there is no other option in the future other than low carbon gas of some form. Electrification just isn't an option for them because of the high temperature heat they're going to need. So it's critical now, it will remain critical in the future. I think the other point that's really important here as well is it's not just about big plastics plants, big steel factories and things like that. Gas is used all across the country by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of commercial enterprises. You might have seen in the news this week, there was a story about curry houses across the country who rely on gas for fueling their tandoori ovens. And real concern. What does net zero in the future of the energy system mean for them? How are they going to get hold of low carbon gas? Would electrification even work for that? And I think there are countless examples of where gas is absolutely fundamental to the way our economy works, and therefore how we transition that gas over to a combination of electrification and low carbon gases as well is going to be really important.
I don't know if you can answer this one. We're going to ask it. I mean, I have my view on this, but I can't see there being no gas in 2050, right? And I can't see us ever really doing without gas because of the chemical nature of gas. So when people say gas has no role to play in net zero, how do you answer that apart from, yes, it does?
So, I mean, the very first thing to say in response to your question is we have to define what we mean by gas.
Right.
People think of gas as being fossil fuel gas that's causing climate change and all the rest of it. To my mind, gas is gases. It is different gases. It is fossil fuel methane what you use now, but it could also be fossil fuel methane with carbon capture and storage on the back end of it. It could be low carbon hydrogen. It could be biomethane or biogases as well. I see gas as a collection of different things. So when you look through that lens and you look to answer your question of can you see a future without gas in it? Absolutely, I can't see a future without gas in it. You're going to need gas definitely for some industrial applications where you're going to need that real high temperature heat. You will need gas as a form of storage, or storage medium really, to manage those periods where the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And it doesn't really matter how much solar you install, how much wind you install. There will be periods, often weeks on end, where output from those renewables is pretty low. And therefore, you're going to require the storage and flexibility that comes from gas for that. I mean, they're to my mind, two reasons why you absolutely cannot do away with gas in some form. There is also just a practical point about what is the counterfactual to use of gas. If it is huge amounts of electrification, is that deliverable? Can we actually build out an electricity network to do that? Can we encourage enough consumers to switch over to electrified and low carbon technologies? And I think for all of those reasons together, when we're looking at 2050, which is now only 25 years away, can I see a world in which gas, or I should say gases in some form, are a fundamental part of the mix still? I really can't.
And we always see things from a UK lens. Globally, gas is as big as it's ever been, isn't it?
Yes, bigger than it's ever been, I think. And for many countries around the world, gas is still seen, and I say gas, I mean fossil fuel gas, is still seen as a clean alternative option, moving them away from coal to what is a much lower carbon, relatively, fuel source than coal. It was seen like that a little bit in the UK a certain time ago, and we've managed to make that successful transition away from coal. Fossil fuel gas is the next target now, but when you look at it through that global lens, I think in the next decades to come, gas is only going to become more and more important as countries try and actually phase out the dirtier end of fuels, which would be coal and such like.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's kind of missing. Protest groups, when they sort of, go against oil and gas, and they go particularly, like you said, the fossil fuel gas, whatever we think, is carrying the bulk of the energy load of all nations right now. Okay, except when they get. So when they try and argue that you should just stop it tomorrow, how do you respond?
Look, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where we could stop fossil fuel gas tomorrow and we could rely just on the cleanest possible energy sources? I'm sure everyone would love to do that. The reality is, we stop that tomorrow, all the lights go out instantly, and our economies grind to a halt. And frankly speaking, we'd be in absolute chaos within hours. We've seen, obviously, what happened. I'm not suggesting that gas had a role in this in any way, but with the blackout that happened in Spain and Portugal, the impact that's had on those societies that day. If you think of that on a sort of more global perspective, you really see how fundamental gas is to energy systems and what the impact of getting this wrong could be. So we need to phase out fossil fuel gas as fast as we can, and we need to replace it with renewables, electrification, low carbon gases as well. But we also have to be realistic that this is not going to happen overnight, and therefore we should plan for a transition where fossil fuel gas still remains very, very much part of the mix for a long time to come yet.
Let's talk about the networks, which is really what your job is there. Let's take these, and I quite like the way you use fossil fuel. Maybe we should use that, right? There's gas, there's fossil fuel gas, and there's sort of cleaner, low carbon gases. So one of the things that people have heard of who are listening is hydrogen, right? And people know hydrogen. They know it from things like blimps, the Hindenburg. There are very few, but there are a few hydrogen cars. And a lot of people, quite knowledgeable people, think it's tosh, right? They say it's too expensive to make. And, I had not an argument, but there's a certain person out there in the industry who just hates it and says none of the pipes will carry it and all of that. There have been some trials about hydrogen and they didn't quite work as well. So is hydrogen a lame duck gas in our clean transition?
So I come back to the point I made earlier that we're going to need gas in some form in our energy system. There's no getting away from that. We're going to need gas as a storage medium to manage those periods where we're not getting what we need to out of renewables. We're going to need it certainly to fuel certain industries for which electrification just won't ever be an option. The extent to which we need gas is a big topic for debate, but we're going to need it in some form. And therefore, getting hydrogen off the ground and investing in it and trying to scale it up and bring the cost of production down has got to be a good endeavour. I understand that at this point, hydrogen is a technology that is currently pretty expensive and it's currently not widely spread. And there's some really big challenges about how we grow that sector. But if we're really, really serious as a nation about getting to a genuine net zero, hydrogen seems like it has to be part of the mix in some form. So there's been a lot of debate over this over the last few years. I think the context, the momentum has changed a little bit with hydrogen over the last few years, but that doesn't mean to say we can drop it as something that needs to be progressed if we are going to really genuinely get to net zero. I also think that you said at the start of what you just said, that people know about hydrogen, they've heard of hydrogen.
Yeah.
But it's not the only low carbon gas that is out there. We see the future of gas as being about a suite of different low carbon gases. Hydrogen, yes, but also biomethane as well. I mean, biomethane is not a fuel of the future. It is a fuel of the now. We are already decarbonising our gas supply with biomethane. We have enough biomethane in our network to heat the equivalent, or enough capacity to heat the equivalent of around 1 million homes. Yet no one seems to know about it. So I'm keen to make sure we stress that our role as gas networks isn't about one technology or another. It is about transporting gas and gases in whatever form we can to help move the nation towards net zero in whatever way we can.
You talk about biomethane. What exactly is it? stuff that, is it cow poo and, the anaerobic digestion? Is it stuff from burning plants? What is it, and what makes it better than the normal fossil fuel gases?
Yeah, so I'll try and explain this as simply as I can because it is quite a complex topic.
Yeah,
Biomethane it can be made from pretty much any organic material. You put that in an oxygen-free environment and what's called an anaerobic digester, and you have a process called anaerobic digestion that turns that organic matter into gas, basically. So you get biogas out of the other end of that, which is a mixture of methane and CO2. You can then upgrade that biogas so it becomes just methane, and you take the CO2 out of it, and that methane can be injected straight into the gas grid. Why is that any different to fossil fuel methane? That's because it is a closed loop in terms of a circular loop. Easiest example probably to explain here is with crops, where you can grow a crop that takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. You then put that through an anaerobic digester, produce biomethane out the outside. You then use that biomethane. Let's say you put it in a boiler, it's burned in a boiler. That CO2 goes back up into the atmosphere, but it is a closed loop over the course of a year or 2 years. That compares very differently to fossil fuels, where the CO2 was locked in the ground millions or billions of years ago.
Yeah. So it can be made from things like crops, it can be made from paper, it can be made from a variety of organic materials that's out.
Yeah, crops, sewage, food waste, other agricultural waste, landfill gas. It is really anything that has that organic element to it that you can put through that anaerobic digestion process.
Can the pipes cope? So as we transition, these pipes have been built, as you said earlier, they're being replaced. Again, some people say that hydrogen just can't be transported because it's so small, the molecules are so small, it can escape through the tiniest bit. And that, I've done podcasts on that, and I kind of think that's a very true thing. And so for some people say that won't work. What is the capability of our networks right now as we move away from fossil fuel gas to, say, a hydrogen or a biomethane or whatever? Can it cope with that, or would it mean ripping up more pipes and sticking in new ones just because of things are different?
So if we start looking at this through a biomethane lens, biomethane is molecularly identical to the methane that's already in the gas system today. So really that question with biomethane isn't the question, because if the system works for methane, it works for biomethane.
Okay.
We've also, as an industry, done a lot of work trialing blending hydrogen into that existing network up to 20% volume at distribution level through a project called HyDeploy, and at transmission level through a project called FutureGrid. Both of those projects has looked at the viability of blending hydrogen into the existing gas pipes and found no major barriers through the work that they've done to that.
Okay, so you can blend it and you can use it.
Exactly, but that is only up to a certain level. The move to 100% hydrogen clearly is a different beast and a different thing to look at. There have been all sorts of sort of trials and pieces of research and work done to say, well, can we put 100% hydrogen into existing pipes? The one thing that is really in our favour here is that we have been doing this programme of work for the last 20, 30 odd years probably by now to upgrade our existing metallic pipes to plastic pipes, which has the nice side effect that it makes them hydrogen ready or low carbon gas ready. So I'm not going to sit here and say that every single last bit of the gas system is absolutely ready as it is right now to transport 100% hydrogen through it, but we are much, much closer to that than we would have been 30 odd years ago. And clearly there is still some journey to go on there. But it's a good question. I think we are much more ready than a lot of the industry think we are.
So technically, if we can green our gases, and people have said the term in the industry about green gas, biogas, whatever you want to call it. And obviously you look at the hydrogen side of things, and, despite what some people might think, there's a lot of good work being done on hydrogen and getting electrolyzed clean hydrogen using other things. If we got to that future where we say gas stays in a different form, whatever, but it's there, are you saying that there wouldn't be, or there shouldn't be, a massive cost? Because this is the thing that it all comes back down to, which is why there's been the backlash against net zero lately. It's the affordability. Would that play in your mind into the positive for gas, because if the pipes can handle it, then there ain't any digging up and replacing. If they can't, then we're in for a big bill.
Yeah, so I certainly don't want to sit here and suggest that a move to low carbon gas doesn't involve cost. A net zero will involve cost. Any pathway is going to involve a bit of cost and a bit of pain.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately up to the politician to work out how they plot a path through that. What I would say in favour of gas, though, is that a whole energy system that encompasses both gas and electricity can potentially save money overall. And you have to look through that system lens around the cost of transporting gas or electricity around, the cost to end users in their homes to make changes to the technologies they use, and the cost of production of these different things as well. If we have some low carbon gas as part of the mix alongside lots of renewable electricity and electrification as well, that really helps us manage those system costs and the build out that you would need on the electricity side. It allows us to reuse, as you referred to, the assets that we already have. So we have this amazing world-class gas grid that is unbelievably reliable. I think you look at the stats and gas grid is sort of 99.999% reliable. It allows us to do that. If we can have gas as part of the mix, it allows us to use the assets that we have and frankly not pay extra money to get rid of assets that are already working really, really well. So I'm not going to sit here and suggest that low carbon gas means there isn't cost. Of course, there's cost involved in all of this. It's not an easy equation, but there are ways that we can use those two systems, gas and electricity, together side by side to really help manage those costs.
The IEA have talked, and you've probably seen the stuff Tony Blair put out lately, and we've covered it. You know, the cost is huge, right? And even the IEA actually says there's a vital role for fossil fuels if we invest in carbon capture. And many say this could be the thing that gives gas, much longer life, because if you can capture the excess carbon and take it out of the system, that makes using gas a lot more palatable for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Where do you see this? Is gas's future intrinsically linked to the success of CCS technology, do you think, for the future?
So I think as Future Energy Networks, we represent companies that transport gas across the country. We don't represent CCS interests in any way. So we don't have or need to really have a company view on the issue. What I would say, though, is no matter where you look, CCS has to form part of the future in some way. There are certain industries where there simply is no other option. Things like cement, for example, where you simply have to have CCS as part of the mix. So if you look through it in that lens and say, well, we're going to need some carbon capture and storage infrastructure, we're going to need a place to store it, we're going to need some pipelines to move that CO2 around. It's just something for us to manage as part of that wider picture around, well, that means we're still going to have some fossil fuel methane in the mix that is used with carbon capture and storage. Add on top of that some biomethane that we are already putting into our grids now, and we have really big ambitions. All the networks have big ambitions to increase that significantly over the next few years. Add to that some hydrogen as well, and you start to paint a picture where we'll have less gas than we do today, significantly less gas being transported than we do today, but we are still going to have a decent amount in the system, and therefore a need to move that around. And there's no better way of moving gas around than pipeline networks. And that's why we see the pipelines that our members own and operate now being a really, really big, important part of both the transition to net zero and the end state once we get there as well.
Final things about gas that I think worth the audience knowing. I'm not going to say that the recent power cuts that we've had across Spain, or even just the other day on the tube in London, but there is an element here where, with more renewables online, and there's been a lot of talk people have heard, and I won't go into the super science, but of the frequency, right? So something drops out, it changes the frequency of the current, and that can throw the whole system out of it. And there's a term they use called inertia, which is kind of the energy that gas turbine plants have. A lot of inertia. They can just keep running and keep it going, which keeps that constancy. In just the short term, do you feel that, gas will have such a fundamental part to play because of that ability to just provide instant power and to be there? Because if you take that off the system, as you said, you get more blackouts.
I'm not going to comment on whether we'll get more blackouts or not. I'm definitely not going to comment on the situation in Spain and Portugal, but inertia is really, really important to the operation of an electricity grid and keeping the lights on. So ultimately, those who are more on the electricity side of things and will be thinking about this in more detail will be thinking, as we transition to more and more renewables, how do we replace that inertia that is provided by gas power plants? And I'm sure they will be thinking it's really, really difficult to do that. I mean, we've got this big push to Clean Power 2030, and gas has, over the last few years, become a slightly smaller and smaller proportion of our electricity generation over that time. But it's interesting that both government and the National Energy System Operator say that the capacity we will need for gas in 2030, even if we hit Clean Power 2030 and gas is being used not very often, is effectively the same amount of capacity that we will need today. It will be being used a lot less, but it will be relied on for those specific periods where wind isn't blowing, sun isn't shining, and to provide that inertia and backup to make sure the system is still stable. And that's where I think gas plays an absolutely fundamental role that probably isn't recognised well enough in energy sector circles. It is that backup, it is that sort of fail-safe to make sure that everything operates as it should. And even if we get to, and I hope we do get to Clean Power 2030 in the next 5 years, I don't see that changing in that time frame. It will still have that fundamental role to play.
So to end with, you are a future energy network then, you think?
Absolutely, yeah. We are very much part of the transition. We're very much part of the here and now. But I strongly believe we have a really, really important part to play in the future. We have a role in supporting the rollout of electrification. So I just talked about the role of gas in Clean Power 2030, but I also believe we have a really important role in putting more green gases into the system, whether that be biomethane, hydrogen, or other green gases, being part of that whole energy system alongside a lot of electrification as well. So yes, I very much believe gas has an important role to play out into the future.
James, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Good chat on gas. I think very interesting, and I think a lot of stuff you've mentioned will get people thinking. So thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
No problems. What do you think, ladies and gents? Drop us a line on social media. I think gas is a vital part of our future. You may disagree, you may agree. Let us know. My thanks to Sally for production on this week's Net Hero. Remember to subscribe, follow us on the usual channels, and listen to us every week on a Wednesday.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.